Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, get ready for South Sudan against Team USA this afternoon. We'll talk about that matchup, what to look out for in it. We'll also check in on all the Wolves around Paris at the Olympics. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Lockdown Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Lockdown Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are now over, we are in the dog days of like normal sports season, right? Even the WNBA is on pause with the Olympics ongoing. So at least we have the Olympics, but there's no, other than baseball, that's it. No football, no NBA. The sports are not sportsing like we want them to right now. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. And we are talking lots of Olympics today. I'll even talk a bit about some of the FanDuel numbers for the Olympics, especially related to men's basketball. Actually, really only related to men's basketball. That's where a lot of this intrigue is. I want to talk about some of that. We'll get to it in a little bit. I want to preview first, though, the Team USA South Sudan matchup. We'll talk a little bit about what happened last week in the 1-point Team USA win in the exhibition, the friendly between the two teams. It took a last 8 seconds LeBron bucket to get Team USA the win. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Talk about what to look for. We'll talk about other Wolves in Paris, and then just a little bit of NBA news as well toward the end of the show here. So we'll get to all that today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So Team USA takes on South Sudan. Of course, Team USA is 1-0. They had a fairly convincing win, impressively, over Nickeil Jokic and Serbia on Sunday. Today's game, Wednesday's game is 2 p.m. Central, and they should win. But South Sudan, as we saw in the exhibition season, is I think the term scrappy can be overused. This is more than that. This team is athletic and they can shoot, and those are things that Team USA has to take very seriously in this matchup. Taking a half step back before we get too deep into the matchup, I just want to put a little bit of context onto like the world rankings and all that stuff, because it's easy to forget, because they almost beat USA in the exhibition season and were beating them by double digits at halftime, and it took a last 8 seconds LeBron bucket to beat them. It's easy to forget that they are ranked just 33rd in the world. And I believe they're the lowest ranked world team coming into the Olympics that are in the Olympics. Let's see, Japan is 26th. And I think that like everybody else is at least a little bit further. Even Puerto Rico's 16th ranked in the world on the FIBA rankings coming into the tournament. So number one, of course, is Team USA. Number two is Spain. And remember these how difficult some of these groups are. So we talked about Group A being the most difficult group. Canada, Australia, Spain, and Greece. I didn't have these numbers handy the other day, but Canada right now is 7th in the world coming into the Olympics. Australia is 5th in the world coming into the Olympics. Spain is still 2nd. They're obviously not as good as they have been in the past. And then even Greece, who's 0-2 already in that group, they're 14th in the world. In Team USA's group, they have South Sudan, who's 33rd, Puerto Rico, who's 16th, and then Serbia, who's 4th, and they've already beaten. So the context there is South Sudan is 33rd in the world coming into the Olympics. It is a very beatable team. However, we'll talk about why it's not exactly a walk in the park. Also, just to I might as well finish Group B. Group B, France is 9th in the world. Germany's actually 3rd in the world coming into the Olympics. And as of right now, me recording this, I think Germany plays Wednesday as well. They're 1-0. France is 2-0. France survived against Japan. I'll talk about that actually quickly here in a second. Brazil is the other team in that group. They're 12th, and Japan, as we talked about, is 26th. So Japan is 26th. South Sudan is 33rd. Those are the two lowest ranked teams in the world. Japan was up 4 with under 10 seconds left against France. You've no doubt seen the replay by now. Gobert actually kicked it out to his teammate, who was fouled on the 3-point attempt, converted the 4-point play, and then France built a quick lead in overtime and ultimately won. But I mean, we're talking about Japan's 26th in the world, France is 9th, and that game should not have been as close as it was. France ultimately comes out with the win. So all that to say, the South Sudan matchup is one that, just based on sheer talent, sheer experience, Team USA should win with relative ease. However, there is NBA caliber talent, at least roster level talent, on the South Sudanese roster. Carique Jones is the one that's most intriguing. He was briefly in the league a couple of years ago, and I think he won like League MVP or Player of the Year, whatever it's called, in the G League as well. He played at Louisville for a couple of years toward the end of his college career, and he signed to play over in Europe this coming year. He's a quick guard, and in that exhibition against Team USA, Carique Jones had let's see, what did he have? He had 15 points. He had a triple-double, 15 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists in that game. He shot just 7 of 21, so his 15 shots were pretty inefficient. He got 19 two-point shots off, didn't make a 3 in the game, and only had 1 free throw attempt. But the quickness, the ability to drive and kick, drive and dish, got him 11 assists to just 1 turnover in that game. And some of the other guys on the South Sudan team just knocked down threes. A couple other guys with NBA experience. Wenyen Gabriel, who just this last year played 5-6 games with the Memphis Grizzlies in their injury-riddled season. Mariel Shayok, you may remember, played briefly for the Sixers. I think the COVID-shortened year, right before the COVID-shortened year. Both of those guys have NBA experience. Shayok was 6 of 12 on threes, and Wenyen Gabriel was a perfect 3 of 3 on threes. They combined to go 9 of 15 from outside the arc. They had some guys off the bench make threes. As a team, they made 14 threes, shot 42% on 3-point attempts in that exhibition. 1-point loss to Team USA. So what Team USA has to look out for is the quickness of this roster overall. Carique Jones especially. JT Thor is another player with NBA experience who is technically still in the league currently. I don't know if he's still on Charlotte's roster, but he's on Charlotte's roster last year. So all of those guys, they've only got one guy who's like really a 7-footer, and he's been coming off their bench for them. I don't know how you say his first name, but Maluak, I think is how you say his last name. He's a little over, he's 7 foot 7'1". He's the only guy with like real size. Now JT Thor's 6'9". They got 2, 3, 6'9" guys, but this is also a game where Joel Embiid needs to be impactful. Now, one school of thought would be you play smaller and quicker to try and combat their strength, but I would argue that Team USA has a big enough talent advantage that they should play their game and actually try and play bigger and force the issue, be dominant on the glass, be dominant in the paint, and that's how they should go about beating this team. In the exhibition, South Sudan had 45 rebounds. Team USA only had 47. They were only a +2 on the glass against what, top to bottom is a much smaller roster. Team USA, besides Embiid and Anthony Davis, like that's kind of it in terms of bigs. But they need to take advantage of their size. They need to use, whether it's LeBron running the offense, and it will be a lot of that, whether it's Embiid inside on the glass, Anthony Davis inside and on the glass, Anthony Edwards bullying guys. But the shooting ability and the athleticism and the quickness of South Sudan is what Team USA really needs to look out for. So I would say you try going to Embiid and try dominating on the glass, try getting shots up on the rim. And, Embiid had 4 offensive rebounds in just 18 minutes in the exhibition game against South Sudan. Use your size to your advantage. And if this turns into, you don't want to get into a track meet necessarily, because the more opportunities that South Sudan has to score, the better off they're going to be. A higher variance game always suits the underdog more. And the quotes coming out of Team USA are appropriate. I mean, Steph Curry's quote was basically quoting what Steve Kerr always says, is that Team USA has, quote, appropriate fear, knowing that they can't just easily win. And that should have been obvious after the Carique Jones triple-double and near loss in the exhibition game. So All that to say, Carique Jones is the name to watch. I should mention there's another player on South Sudan's team who has went to Matamidi High School in Minnesota, and I lost his name. Let's see if I can find it real quick. But he's a player to look out for simply because of the local ties. I think it's Nuni Amat. Went to Matamidi High School, played a couple years at Concordia St. Paul Division II before he transferred, or actually ended up getting a scholarship to Baylor and played there. Bounced around, played a little in the G League, played a little overseas or a lot overseas. He's 29 now. So another name that with some Minnesota ties. So NBA ties, Minnesota ties. Yeah, I mean, Shayok and Carique Jones are probably the two to watch the most in terms of on-court impact with this team. I should also mention their head coach is Royal Ivy, of course, former NBA player, played with the Sixers and Thunder, and then former Timberwolf Malak Deng is the lead assistant coach for South Sudan. So lots of NBA ties there. Not a team that they can completely overlook and take lightly in case the exhibition last week was not enough of an indication toward that. So big game, because every game is big in the Olympics, to make sure that you put everybody away and you move on to the semi or the quarterfinals, I guess, with a sparkling record. So that's Wednesday afternoon. Thursday, we'll basically just do a post-game pod again. I'll go through what happened in Wednesday's game. We'll talk about that on Thursday's show. All right, next up, I want to talk about other Timberwolves players in action in Paris, a couple other Olympics-related things. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But now, other than the Olympics, there's not a whole lot else going on in terms of games here stateside. The sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long, and there is plenty to talk about over at FanDuel. I want to get a little bit more into these actually here in a minute, but right now to win the gold medal, Team USA is minus 500. The next best odds is Canada plus 1,000, which makes a lot of sense. And Germany, because they're 2-0 now, is plus 1,500. France is also 2-0. They're plus 2,000. Serbia plus 2,500. They've already lost their only game so far. Australia is plus 3,000. I think they're 1-1 now. So, and also, by the way, silver medal winner, Canada is the favorite there at plus 250. USA is fourth at plus 600 to win the silver medal. You can bet on individual games. We talked about South Sudan. Team USA is minus 29 right now to beat South Sudan. I don't know that I would necessarily bet the USA at minus 29, but you could, or you could take the points of South Sudan. I don't know that I'd do that either. It's probably a stay away from me, but you can find all that over at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt that you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, you can make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Let's talk about some Wolves in Paris. I don't want to get back to a couple of those FanDuel numbers. So, right now, well, actually, so on Tuesday, Canada and Australia played each other, which was a matchup of we'll call it Team Nickeil Alexander-Walker against Team Joe Ingles. Now, Joe Ingles did not play at all for Australia. He played like less than 3 minutes in their first game. Did not play in this one. He appears to be the 11th man on a team that's playing 10 guys regularly. So, I don't know, probably good. Not add any or not take any more tread off the tires for Joe Ingles. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has not done a whole lot offensively at all. He's been playing for them, but he just I don't even think he scored, actually. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, he was scoreless in 9 minutes of play for Canada. So no real impact for Alexander Walker. An easy win. It ended up being an easy win. It was close for the first 3 quarters or so, but Team Canada won by 10 ultimately. And again, scoreless for Alexander Walker and minuteless for Joe Ingles. So we'll keep an eye on those guys. I think probably depending on the matchup, we may see a little more Alexander Walker. Australia's kind of a weird mix of like a bit of a bigger team, but yet they still want to try and play fast. Alexander Walker, I think maybe against some of these teams like a Team USA, you could see him guarding some of those smaller guards or more talented guards for opposing teams. But not every team in the Olympics is going to have the perimeter power that, say, an NBA team would have, where, of course, Nickeil Alexander Walker would be a primary defender there. And then later in the day, we talked. I already mentioned the Team France hanging on to win over Team Japan, which was insane how close that was. Gobert scored a little bit early, didn't score much overall in the game, and he did have I think he got credited with an assist on that big 4-point play. He had 7 points. He was only 1 of 5 at the free throw line, 3 of 6 from the floor. He did have 15 rebounds and a couple of blocks, and his impact on the glass was huge. For what it's worth, he was a plus 12 in the box score for whatever. Again, I don't think it's worth a lot, single game individual player plus minus, but in the Olympics against a team that you are bigger than, I mean, obviously between Gobert and Wembanyama, there's a huge size advantage over Japan, and the 15 boards is big, and that's Gobert against a lot of these smaller teams. He's going to have to assert himself and dominate on the glass, and he did that in this game. So that means that, and those were the other 3 Timberwolves players. They were all in action on Tuesday, and of course in action on Wednesday. So Canada's now 2-0, France is 2-0. They're the only 2-0 teams. The United States and South Sudan are the other 2 undefeated teams playing each other on Wednesday. So assuming Team USA wins that game, the Team USA, France, and Canada will each lead their respective groups at 2-0. And then we'll have South Sudan at 1-1, Australia and Spain at 1-1. Remember, it's the top 2 teams in each group and the best 2 third-place teams that advance. So Spain at the moment is still in a decent enough spot to advance, even though they've lost. And I guess you could say the same about certainly Australia. So still looks like a pretty good chance we have all 4 Timberwolves players, at least their teams, in action in the quarterfinals as the Olympics advance. In terms of some of those other FanDuel numbers, I think it's pretty interesting when you look at some of the different, like the different medal odds and things like that. Team USA versus the field. You could take Team USA at minus 500 or the field for plus 340. Like plus 340, that's not good enough to take the field. I mean, Team USA is the obvious favorite. You could also pick like winners for each group too. So for Group A, well, that one Canada's already got a 2-game lead. I guess Group B as well, that France has a 2-game lead. So that's pretty likely. And then there's also some different prop bets on there. Jason Tatum, of course, did not play infamously in the first game. And Steve Kerr's quote was, "I felt like an idiot," is what Steve Kerr said about not playing Tatum. So you can also, you could do a prop bet on how many points Tatum scores in the game against South Sudan. And I would imagine that he's going to see pretty significant time as Steve Kerr tries to right his wrong. And also a game that, like, I mean, give him some run. Like you should really win this game going away. I talked about the gold medal winner, the silver medal winner. USA plus 1,000 to win the bronze medal, which, they did last year. And I know it's different, but last year in FIBA, they won the bronze medal. That would be just a really depressing bet to make if you were a Team USA fan, but they're plus 1,000 to win the bronze medal. Canada, the favorite there at plus 340. Canada is also the favorite, as I said earlier, to win the silver at plus 250. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. I think that's all I want to hit in terms of Olympics right now. We talked about the standings already. Talked about Wolves in Paris. A couple of things I want to touch on here. We'll call it stateside related to the NBA. Tyus Jones has a new team. I want to talk about that and just a quick kind of like, where do we stand right now in the Western Conference? Where do the Wolves stand in the overall landscape? We'll do that here next. All right. Oh, I know one other thing I wanted to hit Olympics-wise that I missed. I talked about world rankings. Well, no, I guess we don't really need to go into that much more. We talked about world rankings. There were also some power rankings that FIBA did some power rankings before the tournament. And incidentally, it had USA 1, Germany 2, Serbia 3, which, looking at the world rankings, like, that makes sense. All it did was it slid Spain down because, of course, no Ricky Rubio. Like, it's just the rankings, the overall world rankings, it's a bigger body of work than like currently right now. So Spain at 7 makes sense for these power rankings. But then besides that, Germany, Serbia, that just kind of follows. And then Australia at 5. They had Canada at 4. but it's very close to the actual world rankings. But these power rankings coming in, which are on the FIBA website, USA, Germany, Serbia, Canada, Australia, France at 6. I guess that makes sense. And then Spain, Greece at 8, South Sudan, Brazil, Japan, and Puerto Rico. Of course, Team USA will get Puerto Rico now after South Sudan. So probably the best overall draw of any of the groups. And you look at this power rankings, and we ended up with 3 of the top 4 or 4 of the top 6 are in the same group in the power rankings, which is just insane. All right. Okay, moving on. Old friend Tyus Jones has finally signing a contract with the Phoenix Suns. He's only going to get $3.3 million. Of course, the Suns are in a similar cap space situation as the Timberwolves are. Tyus is going to, $3.3 million. And basically the thought process here is the Suns need a point guard. We know that. That was a much discussed item, especially in the wake of their sweep at the hands of the Wolves in the first round of the playoffs, which, by the way, a 3-seed sweep at a 6-seed, especially a 3-seed that was in first in the West all year, isn't that crazy. Usually it's a gentleman's sweep, if not a little more competitive, but it's not like insane. It's just that coming into the series, the Suns were actually favored on FanDuel. Remember that? The Suns were favored to win the series. I was worried about it. I actually picked the Suns to win the series. I think I said in 7, though. But I think I picked the Wolves to lose. I think it was in 7. I might have picked them in 6. But I remember I did the crossover with Brendan Clean at Locked On Suns, and he had the Suns in, I think, 5, which was always crazy. But I mean, I don't know. Like, that was one of the things that was talked about quite a bit after the sweep was like, hey, they didn't have somebody to slow it down. They didn't have a floor general. They didn't have a point guard. And then, of course, the coach gets fired and they end up with Budenholzer down in Phoenix, which I don't know that he's necessarily. We'll see after time away from the game if he is a calming presence that perhaps Frank Vogel wasn't. We saw Frank Vogel lose it in the playoffs a little bit. But all that to say, both of those guys are, of course, title-winning coaches, finals-winning coaches. But Tyus in Phoenix is a great fit. And I love Tyus Jones. I think I said this when he was at the Wolves. I thought he was the best backup point guard in the league at the time. And he, of course, got the contract extension in Memphis and ended up getting traded to Washington. He was, got 6 Man of the Year votes in Memphis the last couple seasons there. Last year in Washington was the first year he'd ever been a full-time starter. And he was really good for a really bad Washington team. He averaged 12 and 7, and he shot 41% on threes, which was by far his best mark of his career. I guess only a couple points higher than where he was 2 years ago in Memphis. But it was a really good overall year. I mean, at this point, he's going to be 28 this year. He's always been undersized, so the defense is probably average-y. But the assist to turnover was as good as ever. Assist rate of 35%, turnover rate of under 9%, which is nuts. I'd say it's a missed opportunity for the Wolves, but clearly that's not what they're going for with their backup point guard spot. They don't want a diminutive guard. And also then the tax penalty of having signed Tyus Jones that the Wolves would have to pay. And by the way, today's Minnesota basketball party, I'm not on today's show, but those guys are going to talk about it, and you'll want to get the takes from Reggie and Ron and Jack on Tyus Jones. That'll be posted. It's actually maybe not right now, depending on when you're watching this, on YouTube on YouTube. But the audio will be live on Locked On Wolves later in the day on Wednesday. So go check that out because I think their takes will be really good on the Tyus stuff. So overall, looking at the Western Conference, looking at some of the teams last year from the playoffs, I did this briefly yesterday, but Denver is not better. Like, we can expect them to win 55 games because they have Jokic. I think that's safe. The Thunder are better. They will be their roster is at least better. The Timberwolves roster is not better, not worse, but you expect, because I think losing Kyle Anderson and gaining Joe Ingles and Rob Dillingham and TJ Shannon is something close to a wash. Higher upside, no doubt. I don't know that the floor is much lower. So I'm going to call that a wash if I'm just doing this here's where we are. Clippers, of course, got worse. We know that. Dallas, I would say overall their moves are pretty net neutral. Phoenix, kind of similar. I don't know that they're necessarily better. Pelicans with health should be a little better. The Lakers didn't do anything. You go on down the line, nobody got crazy better. Of course, you have to consider Wembanyama and the Spurs signing Chris Paul. And if they want to compete, could they win 40+ games? Probably. And then probably strong, maybe a strong maybe. Memphis, of course, with Ja and additional relative health, like they should be better too. So, I mean, the only teams that you would say are like true conference finals or finals contenders would still be OKC, Denver, Minnesota, and you have to put Dallas in there because they went to the finals, of course. You'd probably say the Suns would be your next one. That's 5 right there, and then you go a tier down, and in some order you'd go Pelicans, Lakers, Warriors, Memphis, right? I don't know, probably that's like your top 10. But that still doesn't include Sacramento. It doesn't include whatever the Clippers are able to do with a possibly healthy at some point in time Kawhi. So a rough and tumble West still, and nobody clearly got worse besides the Clippers. The Nuggets got a little worse, but I don't know that it really matters grand scheme of things, at least in terms of what they can do in the regular season. So crazy times for sure. And of course, if there's any other additional movement, if there's any significant trades, we'll talk more about that. And soon here, we'll get into team preview season. I'll be doing the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Show, previewing the Timberwolves. And, once we get through the Olympics, we'll look at some actual like rotation predictions and stuff like that as we move forward. We're still daily through the rest of this week. So I'll have a show on Thursday as a post-game pod following Team USA South Sudan. And then we'll have a show Friday as well. Next week, we'll move to 3 shows. Most weeks will be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, pretty much taking you up until training camp. Mid-September, we'll do 3 shows a week until then. So make sure you're following and subscribe to the show wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Of course, a reminder that YouTube, for the most part, has been posting the evening before the show posts on audio. So you can always watch the show a little bit early on YouTube, and then you'll get the audio early in the morning on, like in this case, on Wednesday. So be sure you're following and subscribed everywhere. Make sure you're following on YouTube as well. I promise I'm going to start posting a comment on the YouTube channel. So if you want to check out, I'm going to pose a question about the Olympics at the top of the YouTube channel, pin it there. So leave me your comment. Let's get a discussion going on some Olympic basketball, because that's what we have right now. This is Team USA. We have Olympic basketball, Team USA, and we're 6 to 7 weeks away from media day and training camp in Minneapolis. All right, that's all we have for today on the show. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A big thank you once again for making us your first listen, and a reminder for your second listen, you can enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA. Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of that same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.